the late, great brother Chette Williams, Auburn football, and the Freedom Cowboys. We're going to be talking about all of those things with Kyle Collins today on 1819 News, the podcast.
We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy.
Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week, sticking with our pattern of going from someone that has to do with state politics to someone who's interesting and doing something worth highlighting. We are now on someone who's interesting and doing work that's worth highlighting, bringing on Kyle Collins, who's the head coach of the Freedom Cowboys, which is I would call it a homeschool football team in Huntsville. We're going to hear a little bit about that story, but also he was a close friend with brother Chette Williams, the late chaplain of Auburn University's football team. And so we're going to hear about their relationship and probably how Chette came to Christ and all of these things. So really excited about that. Kyle, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we jump into the podcast, I want to tell you guys, it's you who make this possible. We are a citizen-supported news outlet. So if you could, to keep us going, you can be the citizen in citizen-supported news by going to 1819news.com. At the top of the page, there's a red button that says Become a Member. You can click that. Memberships start as little as $5 a month, or you can join at whatever level you're comfortable at. With that, you get access to behind-the-scenes content, merch. We got really cool merch, hats, sweatshirts, all that kind of stuff, depending on the level you join. But again, more than anything, you're the citizen and citizen-supported news. We're able to shed light on corruption and really move the needle politically and do the things that we do because of you. So please go join there today if you've not. And if you have joined, well, go get one of your friends to sign up as well. So digging right in now. So how we got here. So Kyle and I have a mutual friend, Stan McDonald, who's also on the board of 1819 News. He's our general counsel, and he's just become a dear brother of mine. And I was talking to him. He's a big Auburn guy, big Pat Dye guy, big Tuberville guy. And I said, Stan, I need help getting some Auburn stories on my podcast because I've had Gene Stallings on, I've had John Croyle on, I've had John Hanna on, I've had Brody Croyle on, I've had Rich Wingo on, I've had all these Alabama football players. And really to hear the Bear Bryant stories is kind of my favorite thing there. I said, I need a good Auburn story. And he's like, you got to have Kyle Collins on and tell you his story about what was the Rocket City Cowboys that are now the Freedom Cowboys, and how he and Stan at the beginnings of that story, but also with the passing of brother Chette Williams, to hear that story as well. So here we are, and where to begin? If you want to first just tell us a little bit about the Freedom Cowboys. What is that? Who are they, and how long you've been involved?
Brian, thank you very much. Yeah, Freedom Cowboys is about 21 years old. I've been with them 20 years. About to start year number 21 for me. It was started by Stan McDonald, who you mentioned. Stan has, at the time, homeschool kids did not have a place to play tackle football because they were homeschooled. And if you know Stan had a bevy of homeschool kids living under his roof, and he wanted his kids to be able to play football. So he started this organization in Huntsville. I think right after the first year, he realized that he didn't know what he was doing. And so he started recruiting people who actually knew how to play football, even though Stan was the head coach. So it was really has grown into a ministry. And truthfully, I cannot tell this story without telling a little bit of my story, because I think that it is, I hope that it speaks to people out there. I was in a completely dark time of my life, and won't go into the specifics of that. But the bottom line was I was going through some struggles, emotional struggles, spiritual struggles, things that were going on in my life. And Stan, who I knew, we went to law school together and we were friends. He calls me one day, says, "Hey, can you come out to practice?" I said, "No, I don't have time for it." He obviously did not know what was going on in my life. I certainly didn't feel like that I could be of any use to anybody. And he said, just come out and watch. So I went out one day as a favor to him, watched practice. After practice, he came to me. He says, hey, Kyle, what'd you think? And I said, well, I think you're doing a lot of good things, but here's some other things that you ought to be able to do. He said, can you come out tomorrow and make sure I'm doing them right? I begrudgingly came out the next day and watched. And one day turned into two turned into 20 years. And that's really how it started. After that season, he asked me if I'd be head coach. What transpired was I realized that we had homeschool kids. We also had some kids that probably needed us more than we needed them. And I realized, and God began to work in me through this program by telling me, hey, the devil is telling you no longer can be a light for me. These kids could care less what has gone on in your life. They just need to be loved. And that's how it all kind of got started. Stan's hung around for a little while. He kind of gave the reins over to me, and we've run with it. And it is truly a ministry. It is varsity, high school, tackle football. We only play 8-man football, and it's the same rules as 11-man. We just have 2 less linemen and 1 less running back. And we are in a conference, and it's football in its purest form. Brian, today football has become so commercialized. Everybody's trying to get a scholarship, get an NIL deals. Listen, you come to see the Freedom Cowboys play, you see a bunch of kids playing for the love of the game, the love of each other, and it's like high school back in the 70s and 80s when I was in high school. So I've been a head coach, but the reason that I do it is because of the relationships that I'm able to get with young men and show them what manhood is about. In the world we live in today, manhood has been attacked, manhood has been redefined, and basically we use football as a vehicle to minister to young men. And as long as it's a ministry, I'm going to stay involved with it because you can fill up a thimble about what I know about football. I think I know a lot, but truthfully, I don't. But I do know something about being a young man in the world and being faced with the temptations that they're faced with. And we use football to kind of teach the gospel, to be honest with you.
That's incredible. And, I've got 7 children and homeschool myself. So that's maybe one reason why we and Stan hit it off. And my oldest son is a phenomenal athlete. He's actually getting ready to go off to Opelika to play in a baseball game right now as we speak. Phenomenal athlete. And one of the things that as he's played sports and played football, and it's exactly what you described. It's not about we had actually in Tallahassee when he played baseball, there was a couple seasons there. We had some great coaches, and it was all about character development, making them good young men. And turns out good young men have to be disciplined, and good young men that are disciplined who are talented end up winning, right? It's not a crazy, recipe. But outside of that, a lot of our school experiences, it's been all about winning. And it was at the expense of the character development and those things. And I remember growing up, it was all about character. That's just the way that it was. And I think you talk about the NIL deals that we're seeing in college, and that's what these kids are looking up to. And everybody wants to be a showboat, and it's all about me, I. And that is, that's not the type of men that we want to develop. And that's not the type of men we want in our society. So I think that's incredible.
Well, let me add to that, and I appreciate you saying that. Football is the ultimate team sport. I played baseball, played basketball, did a lot of other things. The first thing I tell these young men is, this is a team sport. You're going to be a part of the team. It's bigger than you are. And if you want to be an individual, go to the tennis court, okay? Go play tennis. This is not a sport for you. But what you're saying is absolutely, to me, builds a lot of character, because football you'll face a lot of adversity, whether you're a great athlete or not. You're going to face adversity. You've got to work through the adversity. And truthfully, I create a lot of uncomfortableness out there. And the reason I do that is because I want these young men to be disciplined by someone who really cares about them. Because when they get kicked out in the world, nobody really is going to be there for them. So we kind of create an atmosphere of, mental toughness, physical toughness, football. And to your point, winning is not really, I could not tell you. I've coached in, I don't know, 100, 200 games. I couldn't tell you what the record is. Don't care what the record is. It is the truth of the matter is I want these young men to be better positioned to live a life as Christ did, to walk and be a light and to do it the right way. You know, I force them to say yes, sir, and no, sir, which is a little thing, but I do. And, you know, when we think about the church, we also put kids in positions, you know, they may want to be the quarterback. Well, I got them playing at guard. And, you know, in the world we live in, the guard's not really a glamorous deal. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
as I've told them, we're just like the church. And they look at me like I'm crazy, but say, hey, the church is full of different types of gifts. And the person who's standing up preaching on Sunday, everybody thinks he's great, but he's worthless without the old widow woman who's sitting in the back quietly praying for him on his behalf. And I try to explain this, that everybody has a purpose. And when everybody does their job, it works. When, you know, every practice, we stop by holding hands in a circle and say, I depend on you, you depend on me. And that's kind of the way we work it.
I love it. Let's back up a little bit, and we will come back to the Freedom Cowboys and some stories over the last 20 years there. But I want to talk to you about your relationship with Brother Chette Williams and just your history there at Auburn and essentially, I guess, based off of the way Stan tells the story, you guys crossing paths with one another is ultimately what led him to Christ, and then he was one of the most significant people at Auburn University. I mean, it's just an incredible story of what being faithful and doing what God wants you to do can turn into.
No, and absolutely. And if I get emotional, I'll let you know that I need to take a second, because Chette ended up being my best friend in the whole world. And the fact that he's gone is still kind of raw. So having said all that, my story is pretty simple. I fell in love with football as a little bitty boy. That's all I ever wanted to do. I just lived it, breathed it. And as I got into high school, I got to be a pretty good little football player. I set out to become the best football player I could be. I always wanted to play in the SEC. And I worked very, very hard. And when I look back, I was probably a little bit of a weird kid now that I think about it. But I worked really hard because my goal was to get a scholarship. And so I finished up my senior year, all state honors, lead the entire state in rushing, and, you know, got all the accolades except for the thing I wanted most, which was for people to be knocking my door down to sign me to a scholarship. In fact, I only get one scholarship offer, and it was from Jacksonville State University. And it was very important to me on behalf of my parents to sign a scholarship. So I signed with Jack State, did go up there, played my freshman year on full scholarship, had a good career ahead of me. I was playing behind a fifth-year senior, and I played a lot. In fact, I think I was only one of about 2 or 3 freshmen that year that traveled with the team. So I had a career set up there, but something was burning inside of me that was my dream. My dream was to play in the SEC. And so after the season, I made a pretty big decision. And that was I would leave a scholarship at Jacksonville State and go walk on. And I just happened to choose Auburn because of Coach Dye. Coach Bryant was at the very end of his year. Of course, Coach Bryant was an icon. I certainly would have loved to have played for him, but I really felt like the opportunity was at Auburn. So I just walked on, went over there and met him. It's a funny story how I met Coach Dye. I stayed there 2 days, couldn't find anybody to talk to. I mean, I literally just got in the car and drove down there one day after our season had ended at Jack State. I didn't know anybody. I just was going around banging on doors, couldn't find anybody. And I actually broke into the back door of the athletic department on the Sunday, the last day I could stay. And he happened to hear the lock pop, and he's there on a Sunday morning. He walks around the corner, and the first words Coach Dye says to me in my whole life is, "Who the hell are you?" And so I've broken into the athletic department, and I said, "My name is Kyle Collins. I play football at Jack State, and I want to talk to you about walking on." And we sat down and had a conversation, and next thing I know, I was transferring to Auburn to walk on. So how we got into Chette is this. One of the things that occurred to me when I got to Auburn was I met a group of guys who really were sold out for Jesus, and it was very impressive to me. And I went to them and I said, "Hey, man, I want to experience what you guys got." And I don't recommend this, but what they did was so impactful because I'd been to enough revivals to know that when somebody got out of their seat and went down to the altar, everybody said, "Congratulations." These guys were different. They said, "Hey, man, are you serious?" Well, we said, "Yeah, I am serious. I've come to talk to you about it." No, they said, "Are you really serious?" I said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "If you're going to make this commitment, you're going to make it not only spiritually, you're going to make it in your dating life, you're going to make it in your academic life, you're going to make it in your football life. It has to become who you are." And they said, "Why don't you go back to the dorm, pray about it, think about it, come see us in the morning if you're still committed." Well, again, I don't recommend that to anybody else, but for me, it was very impressive because it meant you're going to sell out to this thing or we don't want you. That's really what it meant to me. And the next morning I got up and said, "Hey, I've prayed about it. I'm ready." And I gave my life to Christ, my total life to Christ. And that changed me forever. Okay. And the rest of the story is this. Being a walk-on at the time, I was in we had a different locker room. Times were a little different back then. And the guy who lockered next to me was this black kid named Chette Williams. Chette had an older brother on the team, Quincy Williams. Quincy was a very, very good football player, and I knew Quincy well because I was on the scout team because I had to sit out a year, and I was having to block him all the time. Both of them were two of the meanest human beings I'd ever been around in my life. And Chette Williams was a bitter, angry guy. I mean, look, there could not have been two people who were more different. He was black. I was white. He came from a poor economic background. I came from an upper middle class background. We had zero in common, zero. But for some reason, Brian, God put him on my heart and said, "Man, I want you to pray for this dude." I started praying for him. I tell this story. This is absolutely true story. Funny story, but absolutely true. This small group that I was in with some of the other ball players, we were going to save the team, right? That was our mission. We were the disciples, and we were going to go save the team. And so, who are you going to be praying for? And I'm praying for Joe Schmo. And I'm saying, "Hey, I'm going to pray for him too. I'm with you," right? Who are you praying for? I'm praying for, John Doe, another player on the team. Well, I'm praying for you. Who are you going to pray for, Kyle? I'm praying for Chette Williams. Literally, and I'm telling the truth, Chette Williams, why? Because he needs Jesus. Yeah, but that ain't never going to happen, Kyle. Honest goodness. And that just tells you what kind of person he was. He was awful. Yeah. I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, anybody who had met Chette over the last, almost 30 or 40 years would tell you, you're out of your mind. He never was like that. But no, everybody who played ball with him in the early years knows him as a bitter, angry, mean son of a gun.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was every day I'd pray for him. God tell him to try to talk to him. I mean, Brian, I would try to talk to him. He'd give me the F off this. He wanted nothing to do with me. Somewhere along the way, I had told Chette, "Hey, if you ever need anything, I want you to know my door's open." Can't remember saying that, but apparently I had. And so one night, and as he's told the story to me that night, and as he's told the story many times, he was such a bad influence on the team, Brian, that Coach Dye called him in the office one night and told him it was time for him to pack it up and head home. And it shook Chette so much, he didn't know what to do. All he could think about was disappointing his mom. He had a brother on the team. He tells a funny story. He said, "Hey, I just got kicked off the team. I couldn't go talk to Quincy because there'd been 2 Williams boys get kicked off the team if I'd have gone and told Quincy what had happened. So he shows up at my door. Now, again, we've never had a conversation. God had just put him on my heart. I just prayed for him and reached out to him. I opened the door and I said, "What's up?" He's got his Bible in his hand. He doesn't tell me what has occurred. He just said, "I need to talk." And he sat down in my room and we chatted a little while. And as he tells the story, I asked him if he was a believer. And he said, "Oh, yeah, he went to church and he had been going to church as a kid." And he tells a story. I don't really remember this. I don't remember a lot of it about the night. But he says that Kyle says, "I didn't ask you if you was religious. I asked you if you had a relationship." And he said that startled him. And so I began to just share with him that God loved him. God had died for him. He knew all this, but this was a moment that had brought him there. And before we left that room that night, he had got on his knees, he and I, beside a twin bed, and prayed to receive Jesus. And he had gotten up. There was no hugging or crying or anything. And he kind of looked at me and said thanks and just silently walked out the door. And when that door closed, Brian, I didn't know what had happened. I'm sitting back going, did he just give his life to Jesus? Did he just do it to get to feel better? I don't know. Well, at about 6:30 the next morning, somebody's knocking on my front door. I opened up, and it's Chette. And this is the amazing part. When you talk about radical transformation of a human being, I open the door, and his face is different. And I've been knowing this guy for, I don't know, a year or two, sitting by him every day at practice. His face is different, lighter. And I said, "What's up, buddy?" He says, "Can I go tell the guys on the team I'm a Christian?" And I jokingly say this. I didn't say it then. I was thinking, you can go tell whoever you want to you're a Christian. Just don't be knocking on my door at 6:30 in the morning. But I said, "Yeah, go tell them all." And why I bring that up is because the door closes, and all of a sudden I realized that I'm his guy. I'm the guy who knelt with him. I'm the guy he's going to lean on. And quite honestly, I'm like, hey, I didn't sign up to be somebody's friend. I just wanted to lead them to Christ. And all of a sudden I realized I'm the guy. So sure enough, we would spend a lot of time together. And what happened is remarkable. He did undergo a transformation. And I started, quote unquote, discipling him and talking to him. And we prayed together. And we started hanging out together. And ultimately, this guy who we were so different, we became best friends, became roommates. And for 40 years, that friendship's never, wore off at all. I mean, through all the things he's been through and I've been through in our adult lives, every single one of them is a phone call. Hey, let's talk this through. So it's a special relationship. And yes, I mean, when Coach Tuberville calls him and says, "Hey, I need a chaplain," and Coach Tuberville calls me an hour later and says, they say that this is the right guy, and they said, I needed to call you. I never talked to Coach Tuberville. I mean, the phone rang. He said, "Hey, this is Coach Tuberville." He had just had the job a couple of months, and he said, "I'm thinking about bringing this guy up." He said, "I want to know what you think." And I told him, I said, you're not a very good football coach if you don't. He's the right guy. And then, of course, he proved that out over the last 20, 25 years.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Brian.Dawson, DAWSON, at 1819news.com.
chette.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you.
I will tell you this, at his funeral service, one of the most impactful things was that one of the people that spoke said, hey, if Chette Williams is shared Jesus with you, or if Chette Williams is baptized you, I want you to stand up. And I bet you 70% of that audience stood up. Yeah. Wow. That was humbling.
And he receives, rightfully so, a lot of credit for the success that happened under Coach Tuberville's tenure. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, look, he's doing the same thing. You know, everybody, how do I say what I'm about to say? All of us are dealing with something. And a lot of those young men who are coming to college on a football scholarship have been told how great they are most of their career, but most of them are really lost. And Chette became the guy that they could go to because Chette understood what they were going to. You get to Auburn, you've been an all-state player. You know, the first day of practice, you realize everybody's an all-state player, right? You realize, hey, I'm in the running back room because everybody can run, right? They wouldn't be in the running back room. And so for the first time, many of these young men were faced with a situation where they realized, hey, I got to start working for it. And that usually would lead to a little bit of depression. And then a lot of them had just lots of things going on in their background, lots of things going on in their families. And Chette seemed to be the guy to stabilize all that by what he brought to them, sharing the gospel with them, loving on these kids. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been down there and, you know, he's hugging guys, loving on guys. Everybody knows, quote unquote, Brother Chette. And everybody loved, quote unquote, Brother Chette. And, you know, it's fun to watch, you know, but Chette was, to me, he was just my best friend. He wasn't Brother Chette to me. In fact, I always made a point when we were together, I never made him say the blessing over our food because I said, everybody's asking you to do that all the time since you're the chaplain. So I'm not going to let you do it. And we would laugh about that. But you know, this goes to the impact that he has on the lives. And you were talking about the character makes the football team better. And that's part of the winning medicine.
Yep. And I've not been around Auburn football for very long. I moved to Alabama 10 years ago. And, you know, I've heard some stories, obviously Bo Jackson, and then, you know, the Coach Bear Bryant stories and stuff like that. So the whole scene, I mean, I've been here 10 years. It's not completely new. But when he passed away, my phone, as a guy who runs a news outlet in the state, just blew up with all these people like calling me and sharing their Brother Chette stories with me. And then we wrote some, and it was just, for me who didn't know him, you know, for my phone to be blowing up and everyone calling, all the Auburn guys calling and telling me their Brother Chette stories, I was just said, what an incredible man. I wish I would have got to meet him.
And you missed out that you didn't. He was an incredible man, and everybody's got a Chette story. That's the thing about it. But Chette is representative of what God can do in somebody's life if they, surrender, and B, are willing to just do what he's told. I'll tell you a story about Chette that I think is hopefully somebody that listens to the podcast will understand. But this was the kind of man that he was. In this dark time, about the time Stan and I got together that we mentioned earlier, I'm not even going into the details. The bottom line, I'd made some decisions that were against what God would want me to do. And I was feeling the pressure of all of that, and I had to keep it to myself. And there was nobody I could share with. This was all internal. And one day, after a lot of prayer and after anguish, I said, I gotta talk to somebody about this. And there was nobody I felt comfortable talking to except for Chette Williams. So I called Chette one day. And I said, Chette, man, you got a minute? Yeah. I said, I got to share something with you. And I went on and shared what was going on. Chette was very quiet. Chette was asked a few questions. Chette soaked it all in, and then Chette said, "Let's just pray, Kyle." And I said, "Okay." And we prayed. He never really responded to anything that I said during the conversation. We got through praying, and he said, "Hey, buddy, I'm going to call you tomorrow and check on you." I said, "Appreciate it." I felt good from the standpoint that I was able to get this off my chest to another human being. And my best friend was the one I turned to. The next day he called and said, "Let's meet in Birmingham. Let's go to dinner." I said, "Sure, that sounds great." So I drove down to Birmingham. He drove up from Auburn. And Brian, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I'm going to tell you what kind of man he was. We sat down, we ate dinner, and he said, "Now I'm going to respond." And what I was involved in was wrong. Let me first say that, okay? Yeah. And he began to tell me I was wrong. And he began to tell me that my behavior was not acceptable. Bottom line is he put a 25-year relationship on the line to tell me the truth of the gospel of Jesus, which I already knew it, and I wasn't really looking for it, but he was giving it to me. And he did it in a loving way, did it in the right way, but it was firm. And at the end of what he had to say, he said to me, looking right across the table, he said, "I will never say these things to you again. We will never speak of this again. I just had to tell you what God told me to tell you." And Brian, we left. I was fine with it, quite honestly, because I knew all this stuff in my heart. And we left there, and what Chette did over the next 6-7 months was every 2 or 3 days would call me, check on me, tell me he loved me. He never mentioned it again. He never called and said, "You remember all those things I told you you needed to do? Have you done them yet?" He never brought any of that up. Our friendship was just our friendship, and he just continued to check in every couple of days. And honestly, I've always had great respect for him, but that was very, my respect just grew immeasurably because it meant so much to me that he was willing to tell me truth. Yeah. And it meant so much to me that he just continued to love me after he told me the truth. And it was a great help, and he was a great help in that situation. And years later, quite honestly, I was able to do much the same thing. And he was going through some tough times, and I said, "This is what you need to do." And I remember patterning it right after what he had done for me. I gave him my advice. I never spoke of it again, checked on him, and we just went through life together.
That's incredible. And that reminds me of what you said. The goal, for the Freedom Cowboys is developing godly men. And, our society is so bereft of biblical masculinity and godly manhood. I just think the modern evangelical church has a problem with confrontation. And football is a very confrontational sport. And Christianity done right has elements of, loving confrontation. And we have to be able to do that. I've got several men in my life who've done that to me, and I've had to do it to them a couple of years, just like you're describing. And if we don't do that, we can't say that we truly love those people. If we don't do the hard thing, the surgery that needs to be performed, right. Instead we let gangrene set in, right? So that's incredible. Well, moving back into the Freedom Cowboys, you've been there for 20 years. You've obviously got a heart for evangelism and discipleship to be there. What are some of the stories, your favorite stories in the last 20 years of what you've seen in the young men that you've coached?
I've got a lot of great stories, but, the bottom line is this. I was trying to raise some money one time. We were trying to buy some new uniforms, and I sat in a room with a group of men who I was trying to get money from. And one of them asked me the question, "What is your success rate?" Okay. And I said, success is defined very differently in a lot of different ways. For instance, I got kids who have been in criminal trouble, who are now living a life as a manager of a Family Dollar. Some people would say that's not successful. I say they're taking care of their kids, they're staying married to their wife, they're working, and they're not in jail. Brian, many of the young men, not many of them, a lot of young men that we've had come through our organization, I can tell you the Spirit of God would tell me they're going to end up in one or two places, either in prison or in a cemetery. And I've had to go to prison. I mean, not prison. I've had to go to the jail, and I've had to bail some kids out. I've had to, love them hard. But here's what I can tell you. I can see some of these kids that I coached are almost 40 years old now, right? And some of these young men are living very productive lives, taking care of their children when, they didn't have a father, but they're being a father. They didn't have a good family life, but they've created a great family. Are they angels? No, but they still call me, and I still call them, and we still converse. So they're, some funny stories are we went to play in a tournament in Columbus, Georgia. I think it was Columbus, somewhere over in Georgia. And I asked where so-and-so was. No, he couldn't come, Coach. Why couldn't he come? He didn't call me. He said, well, he can't leave the state. And, you start laughing today. He's like, what? Why can't he leave the state? Well, he was on parole. He couldn't leave the state. So we've had those groups, okay? And then we've had, and I say this all the time, you never know. You never know what's going on in people's lives. You never know what's going on in their families. And I've run into we've coached a lot of autistic kids that have, there's some funny stories with that. But we are providing an opportunity for young men to play football that probably if they went to Spain Park or Thompson High School, they're never going to see the field. They're probably, they're never going to get to do that. And they'll never get to experience some of the things that football can teach. We've been very successful too. Again, I don't know what the record is, but I can tell you that most years we're better than a lot of other teams. And and I don't know, I don't want to say that about me. Again, my job, when it becomes about football, is the day I'm going to quit. So we've been successful. We've had great, we've had a couple of kids that went off to college and played ball. That's not our goal, but if there's a kid there that wants to do it, we're trying to help them to do it because we're just trying to further what they're doing. So it takes us too long to tell all the funny stories, but you need to ask Stan sometime about Stan became the athletic director, okay? And Stan didn't understand that you really don't need to play a team 3 times in the same season, right? And by the third time we'd played this team, both teams were a little nasty with one another. And right after we won the game at home, we happened to be standing around talking, and a brouhaha started up near the bus with the other team and turned into a fist fight. And, your head coach ended up, the funny thing is I dove on this kid and told him to quit. And then they knocked us down and started jumping on both of us. And so as soon as I told him to quit, I said, we got to get our way out of here. So we fought our way out of there. So those are some of the stories.
Oh, man. Well, that's awesome. Going into your 21st year, that's a real commitment. I'm doing math in my head right now, which isn't my strong suit, but 21 years ago, I think is when I graduated or was supposed to graduate high school. By all measures, I could have played for you both in age and also choosing bad paths in life. So that's incredible. Any other thoughts you want to share with the audience before we wrap it up?
I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, we didn't talk about the days at Auburn and the days of playing with Bo Jackson, and that was such a great honor. Bo and I actually started off together in '84. and then Bo broke his shoulder that night against Texas. And I tell some funny stories there. They moved me.
Yeah,
they moved me over to where he was because the guy who was, and he'll remain nameless, the guy who was backing me up, they didn't really want to shift sides, right? Because maybe he wouldn't get all that. He was a phenomenal athlete. He just, probably didn't make the dean's list. Let me put it that way. And so we ended up, so I got to start off. I was going from walk on to being a starter, and we played. And I will tell a funny story. Bo had surgery, missed, I think, 6 games. I can't remember. It's been so long ago. And we're playing Florida in Gainesville. And nobody knows Bo's dressed, and nobody knows Bo's going to come back. We kept all that a secret. This is long before the internet ever existed, right? And so I forget what, first quarter, middle of first quarter, maybe start second quarter. We're backed up way up on our own goalpost, right in front of the Auburn fans. And I'm in the huddle. And all of a sudden I hear the greatest roar of all time, right? People were going bananas because Bo Jackson is now trotting onto the field. And they didn't expect him to play the rest of the year, which is cool. The only problem is, who he was coming in for, right? So it was a very humbling experience. And anyway, that's a funny part about the whole thing. Listen, I was
telling Stan.
Go ahead.
Telling Stan, he told me that you were a backup for Bo Jackson, and it's like, usually when you're playing football, you got the guy that's ahead of you, and you're like, man, I'm going to watch game film. Yeah. I'm going to hit the weights, and then I'm going to take him out. And it's like, that was never the case for you.
No, it's just we started off together, and then when they moved me over there, I'm going to tell you a cool story about Bo, though. We won 6 games, got beat against Florida, if I remember correctly, and the next game was a home game against, I don't know, one of those directional schools. It might have been homecoming. And he, of course, he's back. He's starting. And we're getting ready to kick off. This would have been the first game after the Florida game when he came back. And Coach Dye used to get up after pregame meal, and he would name the starting lineup. He'd just peel it off. Well, when he got to halfback, he said Kyle Collins, and he went. I was like, wait a minute, that must have been last week's list. It's not this week's list. I found out some time later that Bo had gone to Coach Dye at pregame meal and said, I've been thinking about this. It's not right. He said, what? He said, you should start Kyle. Because, I've been out 6 weeks. I'm coming back. He's been here the whole time. Let him start this game. And Coach Dye thought it was the right thing to do, too. But I thought it was so cool that Bo would do that for me. Look, even I know he's supposed to be playing in front of me, right? One of my jokes today is I'll meet people and they say, oh, Kyle played down at Auburn. And my best comeback is, oh, yeah, you ever heard of Bo Jackson? And, of course, everybody says, yeah. And I said, well, that's the reason you ain't never heard of me. So, anyway, it was a great time. Listen, I earned a scholarship. I got a free education. I got a championship ring. It was a dream come true. And I was glad to be a part of it. Very thankful for it.
That's awesome. Well, I know I love storytelling. That's actually what makes good content, by the way, when you're like, I got a story. You just go into stories and you can fill up an hour with a bunch of different stories, and it's the best podcast you ever heard. So I appreciate that. Is there anything, if people want to learn more about Freedom Cowboys, like if they're up in the North Alabama area, or if they want to give, or if they want to financially support what you're doing, where can they go?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was not. The first thing is we're 20 years old and we don't even have a home. For the last 20 years, we've been begging, borrowing, and stealing. Need a place to practice, need a place to facility, need a gym, need all these things. For 5 years, my church has furnished that, but they've been growing so much that after last year, we don't have a home. So we have, in faith in our Father above, we're going to get ready to find us a home. And so we started kind of the capital campaign. And we're raising money. We have no idea what we're going to find. Don't have any idea where it will come from, but we're believing that it will. So if anybody who's listening to this has any questions first, certainly they can get in touch with me, or they can send money to, you can go to our website. It's www.freedomcowboys.com. And that tells you everything about me, about what we're doing. And if you choose to give, my athletic director will certainly respond to you, and anything can help. We don't know whether we need $100,000 or, $10 million, but we're believing that we going to get us a practice field, going to get us a facility, a place to call home. One of the things we haven't been able to do, Brian, is when you're borrowing somebody else's space and you decide, okay, on Wednesday nights we want to have a Bible study, you can't automatically say, let's all meet down at the field house, because we really don't have a field house. You got to check and make sure somebody's not using it. Those are the type of things I think would enhance our ministry a lot.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And we kind of have a similar situation here in Montgomery with Ezekiel. We kind of do the same type of deal as a homeschool.
Do your kids go to Ezekiel?
My oldest plays baseball.
Okay, well, they're one of our biggest rivals.
Yeah, I figured. As you started talking, I'm like, I bet
we play them a lot. We're not in their conference.
Yeah.
We're in a conference up in Nashville, but we've been playing Ezekiel every year for the last 10 plus years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And my son does not play football anymore. He got a real bad concussion, so we had to pull him out, unfortunately. But yeah, would have enjoyed that.
Okay, that's a good connection point.
Yep, there you go. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. Again, to my audience, go and check it out, specifically if you're up in North Alabama. Learn more about them, a ministry that's turning boys into men. That's what we need, and so grateful for your work.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you having me on, buddy.
Awesome. All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this week. As always, until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.